Welcome, we're here at shul.com and we are doing Halachot ben Ishchai Parashat Noach, and we are continuing on Halachot Tzizit. Let's begin. Shelosha mine talitem. There are three types of talit, of fabric. Echad shel semed lechedim b'chayalim. It's the wool of sheep and of rams, goats. So you have goat and sheep, lambs. Uftalit ze yaseh gam hasitziyot shelo mitzimer haniskad. So he's saying that the beged and the strings have to be from the same material. So if you want to use a cotton material, he didn't speak about cotton yet, you would have to have cotton strings, or if it's wool, wool strings. Oh, really? That's how he's bringing it so far. That's the chiyuv of the Torah, that it's from the tzemed of the chedim or ayalim. So lamb wool, goat wool, where you have the beged and the strings the same, that would be counted of the mitzvah of the Torah, because we're going to see it some other opinions.
I wear cotton. I don't wear wool.
Yeah, so we're going to get to it. That's the mitzvah from the Torah according to everyone. The second one, talit shel semed gefen. What's semed gefen? Cotton. He says the cotton tzitzit or talit shel meshi, made out of silk. Ubaze yesh pelukta. There's an argument. The yesh omrim hayab min Torah. Some say it's from the Torah. V'yesh omrim hayab min Rabbanan. Some say it's from the rabbis. Those materials, silk and cotton. V'gam leman de'amad dechiyavod min Rabbanan. And those that said it's also from the rabbis, yuchad levarech alav. You could still make a beracha on that tzitzit, k'mod de'merachim al mitzvah de Rabbanan, just like you make a mitzvah of the Rabbanan. Ubinyan hasitziyot. Now the strings. Afagav diladat maranzal, that according to the Shulchan Aruch and Orach Hayim Siman Tet Seif Bet udime yuchad aniach tzitziyot shel semed lechim o gam bebegadim shel shar minim, that even though according to the Shulchan Aruch you can take any beged, wool or cotton, and put strings that are not the same material. Im kol ze im talit hu shel semed gefen, if it's made out of cotton, the talit. You should use the strings on the tzitzit the same as the beged. Ya'an le'da'at harav Meir Merotenberg. So according to the Maharam, in the Shut Maharam Depus Prague Siman Tav Mem Daled and Tashbetz Katan Siman Resh Samech Zahin Udi'ime en potrim tzitzit shel tzemed bebegadim shel sh'ar minim, that if the tzitziyot are made out of wool, it's not poter the other garments, according to the Maharam Rothenberg and the Tashbetz. Lechach, in order to avoid this argument, that when you do the tzitziyot, make sure the strings and the garment are from the same material. Mihu, that's when it's made out of cotton. You make cotton about if it's made out of silk. It's very hard to find silk tzitziyot strings to put on your garment. In the Orachim Siman Tet, and then it's Seif Katan Bet, that even with silk, you have to, when you're doing the process of creating the strings and the fabric, you have to do it lishma. It's just like it is with wool, it is with silk. Now, silk comes from worms. Yeah. It's a process of coming from the worms. It's very hard to find a silk garment with silk tzitziyot.
Wait, I have a question.
Yeah.
Now, aren't we not supposed to use something that was like, we can't make a mitzvah out of something that was used that was harmed from that on?
So why is it harmed? The silk, you don't kill the worm.
Kill it?
No, you actually, today when they make the silk, they actually kill the worms inside. But the right way would be just to take the silk itself. What we're talking about is when you're wearing the tzitzit and the tzitziyot strings, do they have to be from the same material? Let's say you want to wear a cotton tzitzit. Does the strings, do they have to be cotton? Could they be wool? So according to the Ben Ish Chai, he's saying, according to the Maharam Rothenberg, that in those opinions, you should have the beged and the tzitziyot with the same exact material. But he says it's not a chiyuv to do it. You don't have to, but he says it's better to do it if you could. He said the main issue is when you come to silk, because silk it's very hard to find the strings made out of silk strings. So what people would do is if they had a silk tzitzit, they might wear cotton strings or wool strings, and that would not be the perfect mitzvah. ואף אגב, תרומת הדשן ז"ל, סימן מ"ד נראה דלא סבר בזה כאותו גדול נסגר. עם כל זה, הנמצא פלוגתא, ואולי גם מרן ז"ל סבירה לכאותו גדול לכך טלית של משי, a טלית made out of silk, אם לא מצא לו ציציות של משי מתוקנים כהלכה על פי סברת אותו גדול נסגר, אז יניח בזה סטית של משי חוטין של צמר הכלים. He says, so if you can't find silk on it, then you could put wool strings. Yeah, we'll shut it. Yeah. So what he says here, if you guys remember the old talitot, they were all made out of silk. I don't know if you guys remember, like 20 years ago, you went to shul, they used to have silk tzitziot. You remember that in shul? Yeah. They were all made out of silk. So the Ben Ish Chai is telling you the garment itself should have the same tzitzit, but it's very hard to find strings that are made from a Jewish person who actually did the whole process of zirikato, umshikato lishma. So he said in that case you could put the wool of sheeps, of rechelim or
what is the one that we're wearing now?
So we usually use the lamb wool. Most of the time it's lamb wool. But if you look in Israel, I buy my tzitzit from this guy Ben's Talit shop. I stopped buying locally. I just ordered from this guy in Israel. He's the lowest price. He's got every material. Tzitzit, he has like 20 different varieties. He has machine lamb wool. He has machine like goat wool. He has handmade. He has the thin one.
Is the most
so he brings here the rechelim, and also he brings ayalim. So if a guy has, let's say, goats, you want to do goat. I haven't seen it, but maybe a guy wants to make a nice talit. It's probably, I don't know, I never have seen it, but it's interesting. If a guy makes a nice talit, he says here, make it a nice quality, but make sure the strings and the garment are the same. So I've been buying now from him the very thin one, the wool one, and I buy the hand strings. You should know that many of the strings are made in Italy. The machine-made strings are not made in Israel. Some might be, but I know that in Italy they make them. So it's interesting that they bring them from Italy to Israel. People don't know that. If you research, ask them, where did you get your CCO? Is it a machine? Did a human being do it? We found recently a beautiful set of talitot in Israel from Talisman, it's called. Gorgeous talitot, but I found that they were cotton. So, according to here, it would be derabanan. Why buy an expensive $400 talit if it's going to be derabanan? According to Sfaradim, Ashkenazim would be deoraita. So you end up learning this. Okay, talit shel meshi. If you have a talit made out of silk, milevachu miderabanan. Even though it's from the rabbis, hinehu gadua yoter mitalit semer gefen. He says it's on a lower level than cotton. Because the chutin are not going to match the fabric. שער שני, חלק א', הבית חדש של אור החיים סימן ט' אור ה'. בסבירה להוא דאין לברך אלא על טלית סמל לכלים וחוצב סמל. So he says there, make sure when you make a beracha on the talit and the tzitziyot that they have the same material. אבל על טלית על שער מינין אין לברך. אך לה קיימה לן הלכה כבתיהו בזה. Okay, he's saying you don't have to be mahmir on this, but you should know the law of what the halacha is, that really your tzitzit garment should be the same as the tzitzit strings, and preferably for Sfaradim, it should be wool and wool strings. He doesn't mention it here, but Ashkenazim, and like Rav Chaim Kanievsky, he wore cotton. He wore cotton beged. So it's important to know that there is a lot of leniencies on that too. והשלישי הוא טלית ששתי שלו צמד החלים, והערב שלו מין אחר. או להפך, זה גרוע ביותר, לדעת מהר"ם מרוטנברג, דאימה, אין תקנה לטלית זה מצד החוטין, רק לדעת מרן ז"ל, יש תקנה לתלות בו חוטין של צמד החלים, כן צריך לעשות. So he's talking here again about the difference of the garments and the ציציות. Okay, ולכן נהוג לכל יראי שמיים להיזהר, בין בטלית גדול, בין בטלית קטן, ללבוש של צמד החלים, make sure to wear wool. If you try, wear lamb wool ציציות. ויהיו החוטין גם כן צמד החלים. Yeah, but I buy the thin wool. You don't have to buy the heavy wool. Buy the thin one. I'll show you. Look here. Very thin wool. You see? It's very thin. You see how thin? You can see through it. Yeah, I buy it from Israel. I buy the high quality one because it's much more comfortable. And by the way, we're in Miami. It's hot over here, and I wear this in Miami. It works. Now, of course, the cotton is better if you want a lighter weight, but I found that over the course of time, when you wear the wool, the light thin wool, you end up getting used to it. So why why not? If you could do it, do it. ויהיו החוטאים גם כמצויים אחרים, ובזה נמצא מקים מצוות עשה מן התורה, ויוצא ידי חובת הבסיסיות, אליבא דחוד העלמא, בלי שום פיקוק. Okay, let's go to bed. יש מיני בגדים שקוראים אותם קרמן, העושים מבד הבא מעיר קרמשנה בשפרס. So he says here, there's a type of cashmere that's coming from...
That's like a really expensive material.
Yeah.
These are for suits.
Suits and for sweaters. ועוד מה שקוראים אותם shal kashmir. So he put the word in there. Okay, shal haba me'ir kashmir shebehodu. So he's saying they come originally from India, or they come from Persia. Behem na'asim mitzemed izim. It comes from the goat wool. Hanikra bilshon hakodesh notzah shel izim. Okay, so that's from the goats. Hine elu dinam kemo she'ar minim. It's just like the other ones. Shehem tzemed gefen or meshi or kanabos. So whether cotton, silk, or cannabis would be hemp. A hemp tzitzit would be allowed. It would be allowed. Let's see. Ki bechol haTorah enu nikrat tzemed bistam ela rak tzemed achalim. Also, he says that according to the Torah, tzemed, whenever it's referring to tzemed, it's talking about lamb's wool. So that's one of the bases he's giving. Shehem hanekevot, and those are the female animals of it. That's why they called the chelim was Rachel. They call it. A Rachel is referred to as a female lamb. You know that Yossi?
What?
That in English a Rachel is called a female lamb. Yeah.
Rachel?
Yeah, Rachel, like a chelim.
Oh, Halim.
The chelim, Rachel. It's called. It's a thing. Ot semed elim. That's the wool of the male goats. Shehem hazecharim. אבל של עזים נקרא נוצה של עזים, ולכן ירא שמיים יעשה חקירה בטליתות שקונה. Research your talitot that you're buying. שיש נראים של סמד החלים ואלים. They look like they're wool of lamb and of goats and of sheep. אך באמת הם סמד גמלים. But maybe you're going to end up buying camel wool. And next thing you know, you make a tzitzit out of camel wool. Could be a problem. או של עזים, or goats. ויש שהשתי צמד והערב מין אחר דאלו גרועים תפה כאמור לאל. And that's if they mix certain fabrics together, it's a problem. It's a problem to have them.
Save money or
Huh?
like save money or something?
It's not about saving money. It's just about being... he's saying that sometimes they did it because they're just not careful. They don't know the thing. Gimel. Beged shel or patur d'chula alma. A leather garment is patur from tzitziyot. De la mikre beged d'hitchayev b'tzitzit ela davar shene'erag. So the only thing that's called tzitzit is something that you actually have to sew or crochet together. You know, in that form, when you're putting together, it needs it. But leather, just cut the piece, it would not need tzitzit. Interesting. Dalet, chutin shel pishtin. Okay, and that's linen. If you have linen strings, afal gab de potir beged shel sh'ar minim, even though it's poter, and you could put it on other garments like wool. Asur litotam bebeged semed. It's asur to put linen strings on a wool tzitzit mishum kilayim, because of kilayim. You can't mix them together. De lo hitira Torah kilayim betzitzit ela hecha deika techelet. It's only allowed kilayim of wearing woolen linen with the tzitzit is only when you have techelet. So let's take a look. So in the time when the Ben Ish Chai wrote this, we didn't have the techelet at the time. He died in 1910. So we have today some techelet, they have Techelet Institute, they have a few people that are researching it. So we are getting close to having something that's...
It's not really the techelet.
Well, according to some opinions, it could be the real one. And so if that's the case, then it's important. Mihu, yesh omrim de'en litlot chute pishtin, afilu bebeged shel sh'ar minim she'enam tzemed. He says, don't put linen strings on any type of garment that's not wool. Because there's some types of wool that look like silk. You might think that you're putting the linen strings on a garment that, let's say, is wool, but it could be silk. And okay, so he says, don't put any type of pishtim on any of the wool strings. But he mentions here, Okay, so he says here, in short, never to put on the linen strings onto a wool garment. He says to avoid doing that. Hey, en lilbosh talit pishtan. Don't wear a linen talit. Afal pishu matil bo chutin shel pishtan. Even though you put on it linen strings. Mishum gezerah. This is gezerah. Why? Rak bishat adchak te'en lo beged acher. Ki'im shel pishtan yatil bo chutin shel pishtan davka v'lo min acher. He says only if you really only have a linen tzitzit, but if you don't, avoid it. So it seems he doesn't like linen tzitziot for whatever reason. He doesn't want people to use linen tzitziot and not linen strings on it. I had a question because I wanted to buy linen shirts. And I wanted to know if I wear a linen shirt with a wool tzitzit, wearing it on top of it. So I found a few opinions. We'll talk about that in the future in the halacha research that I'm doing now to see.
How would that be an issue over it?
Yeah, so because I was researching along with it the energies that come in fabric. Certain fabrics have energies that are natural fabrics like wool or cotton, while synthetic don't have any energies on them. So that's where I got into it. But we'll go into that halacha when we get into it. Above, talit she'en la arba kanafot. Let's say you have a garment that doesn't have 4 corners on it. Let's say it only has 3 corners on it. Petura min tzitzit. You don't have to put tzitzit on it. Ve'im hi ba'alat 5 kanafot o yoter chayevet. But what if you have a 5-corner garment? Does it need tzitzit?
No. I mean, it says chayevet, but I don't see how.
It says here, chayevet. It needs it.
Why?
So let's see. Ach lo yatil tzitziyot lechol kanfoteha. But don't put...
Five.
No, he says don't put it on all the corners.
Like 5, 4 that are...
Ki im yatila arba kanafot bilvad. Only put it on 4 different ones. So if you have a garment with 5 corners, you only put it on 4. Ki im yatila arba kanafot bilvad. V'yizahel la'aniach ha'chotim ba'arba kanafot ha'meruchakot zo mizo. Put it on the corners that are the farthest from each other.
But if it's 3, you don't put?
3, no. Ki ha'meruchakot nofel alehem shem kanafot tafeh. The farthest corners are the ones that you would call the corners. If you put 5 corners on a 5-corner garment, that is considered bal tosif. You can't add. That's making an avon. So you have to be careful in that case. Stay away from a 5-cornered talit. And let's say you find the 5-corner garment of talit and you want to put tzitzit on it, stay away from it. If you could, avoid that one. Said there's an argument on it, so stay away from it if you could. Kanfot hatalit, the corners, shehem hakiranot shematil b'hem hatzitzit, asarich lihiyot miduba'im davka v'lo agulim. They need to be square and not round on your corners. When you make your tzitziot, you have to make sure that the corner is square. She'en igul nikra kanaf. If it's round, it's not called a kanaf. So when it says al kanfe vigdehem,
It doesn't round exactly because it's not round, but it's like
it's a 90-degree angle, so it's a square.
But it's not like exactly.
It's a square. It maybe because it's a garment.
Even if it's like this, it doesn't count. It's like a roundish.
No, if it's rounded, if the corner is rounded, it's no good. It has to be a corner. You have to make sure on your talit katan because they're sewing it and crocheting it together. Sometimes it could look round on the corner, and you have to be careful that that doesn't happen. Let's look at het. Let's say the talit got ripped. Make sure to sew it back together right away. So it doesn't have 6 corners, because if you cut a 4-corner talit, what ends up happening? No, you have 6 corners. He says here you can sew it together. Even though when you cut, let's say somebody's talit gets cut, he ends up having 6 corners. Even though you're patur and you're not allowed to add it, you should sew it right away. But if you end up, let's say the majority of the talit beged got ripped, it's already majority. You have to remove the tzitziot from it already. Then you have to sew the garment back to a 4-corner garment, and then you put back the tzitziot.
Can you just take off one string to make the whole thing up?
No, you have to take off all the tzitziot. Yeah, and you can't cut them. You have to remove them by hand or by your teeth, because you're not allowed to cut the tzitzit strings with a metal with something metal. Because it says that you have to make the tzitziot from something that you are creating ta'aseh, not something that's already made.
What about plastic?
What do you mean? What about plastic?
Plastic knife.
Plastic knife would probably be okay for cutting it, but you should. We'll talk about it later because it talks about that you have on your tzitziot how many on each side. Each corner you have 8.
Yeah.
Right? It's 4 strings times 2, so it's 8, 16, 24, 32. And they say do it with your teeth. Why? Because you have 32 teeth. So the 32 teeth can live to remove them. That's if you want to cut them, that they would bite them off in order to rip them.
What's so bad with 6 corners?
Nothing wrong with it, but the Ben Ish Chai says not to put corners, not to put tzitziot on more than 4 corners. So he says if the talit rips down the center, then it went from 4 corners to 6 corners. He said sew it back together. Only in the case where the majority.
How does it come into 6 corners? There's 4.
Yeah, very sure. I'll show you right now. Here, let's say you have a 4-cornered garment right here. Okay. I'll show you right now. Here. Let me draw it for you.
Fold
1, 2, 3, 4, and then you have your 5 and 6. Take a look. Here, we'll do it right here. You see here? You have 1, then you have 2 corners, 3 corners, 4 corners. If it rips down the center, then here you have another corner and another corner here.
I thought it rips in the middle.
It did rip in the middle right here. So you see these are the extra corners. 5 and 6 are right here. So he says when this happens, and in that case, it doesn't. You're not allowed to put tzitziot there. But there's a problem. Now, 1 second, Jojo. So what you do here in this case is that you sew this back together. The problem is if this ends up getting ripped majority, then you have another problem. You have to remove the tzitziot, fix the garment, make it one, and then put the tzitziot back because it has to go in the process from ta'aseh, done, not from the asui. It's already made.
Dad,
yes.
what's about it? Could you put like a different kind of material?
For where?
For the city, if it's maybe goat skin or.
No, so we spoke about that.
Can we put linen with it?
No. We said that if it's a wool garment, then it has to be wool tzitziot. If it's cotton, you could use wool or use cotton. It's better to use the same.
What's the problem with needing to sew it back? We said that we could have 5 corners.
You could, but it comes up to an issue, and he says that if it's ripped, like let's say a quarter of it ripped, only 25%.
Yeah.
Okay, so sew it right back together. You won't need to put on it any more tzitziot, but you're coming into a safek because you have extra corners on there. You're not allowed to add tzitziot because that's called bal tosif. That's adding. But whenever you come up to things that are mahloket, where one rabbi says allowed and one other one says not allowed, we get the halakha l'maaseh that it's what you have to do. But if you could avoid getting into that situation of a problem, then we avoid it.
Yeah.
So let's end it on this one. Rav Kavdeh la kamena la kisbirazo ki maran zal ora hayim siman yud seif aleph פסק דחייבת, עם כל זה יש לזהר בזה לכתחילה, בדבר הזה ימסה הרבה בטלית גדול, שעושים אותו משתי חתיכות ששותפים אותם ביחד, הם יבלו חוטי התבלה ויהיו נחלקים זה מזה. He says just be careful of that situation. So just to review quickly, what we said here in the majority is that when you have the talitot, you have the wool of lambs, you have the wool of goats, you have silk wool, you have linen. Linen, the Ben Ish Chai says to stay away. When it comes to the wool garment, he says to try to use wool strings, and he mentions the dechedim, which is the female of the lamb, as the best one. And he says also to research where you're getting your stuff from, because don't make assumptions. Oh, I thought he said to me, ask, and don't be afraid to ask. Is it machine made? Is it handmade? And so and so. Baruch Adonai le'olam, amen v'amen.